I'd say that like being Claude-native really started in the end of December last year, January this year. That's really when the modern agentic tools that Anthropic built came out and was a game changer for me. I was waking up just like more joyful about the practice of law. I was feeling like I was doing more of the stuff that I actually went to law school to do. I am actually not a tech savvy person.
I'm still shocked at the fact that you said that you're not a technical person. How do you create something when you're not technical?
Prompt engineering, I actually think, is kind of the most important white collar skill of the next decade. You need good judgment, and then you need to know how to talk to the AI in this way. And whether you call that prompt engineering or something else, I think it is deeply important, and yet companies are not yet adequately selecting for this skill that I think is about to be just incredibly in demand. I think that's what is going to mean to be a lawyer. Like, I do deals across the table from other lawyers, and my turnaround time and accuracy, it's just like an unfair advantage, right? We're not on the same playing field.
I actually wrote a post on LinkedIn. I basically asked AI, so Perplexity, to run through more than 200 legal jobs in London and to see if any of them mentioned AI skills or prompting or AI literacy or anything around AI, and not a single one mentioned it. Why do you think that so many law firms or people within the legal industry are not realizing that prompting is the number one skill that needs to be learned?
I think there are a lot of reasons for that.
In this episode, I'm interviewing Zack Shapiro, founder of Reigns LLP, a Claude-native law firm. He uses custom AI workflows, not pricey legal tech tools, which he claims can outpace traditional firms by mastering the arts of communicating with the AI itself. In this conversation, I ask him how exactly he created a two-person law firm managing over 200 clients without being a technical person. He also tells me which skills he thinks lawyers should be learning as a non-negotiable now. So, Zack, I'm really excited to speak to you because you have blown up on the internet, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or it's called X now. I'm just so excited to hear about your journey, your story, how you came up with the idea of building a Claude-native law firm. When did the idea first come to mind?
Well, so there were two separate ideas. There was the idea of becoming sort of an AI native law firm, and then writing about it. The AI native law firm sort of came naturally. I practice with my practice focus on startups and corporate law. I'm at sort of the intersection of business and law questions, and I really try and both sort of stay abreast of whatever the latest technology is, and think about just from like a client perspective, what can I do to sort of make things easier on myself and be able to deliver a better work product. And so when generative AI came out, it pretty quickly became clear that this was going to be a very powerful tool. At first, just sort of like for wording and drafting things, and then increasingly for more complicated tasks like research. And then, with the new agentic tools that are out, substantially all of my practice is now sort of mediated through AI at this point. And so that was an iterative process. And I'd say that like being Claude native really started in the end of December last year, January this year. That's really when the modern agentic tools that Anthropic built came out and was a game changer for me in terms of the capabilities. I started writing about it, I guess, at the end of January or early February. I wrote two pieces that came out before the one that went viral. What really inspired me to start writing was two viral pieces that came out before mine. The first was an X article by Matt Schumer called "Something Big Is Happening." He's a software engineer and talking about what he is seeing in terms of job automation and sort of warning his non-technical friends, like, this is coming for lots of our jobs and something you need to take seriously. And then the other was a sort of a finance research article from a firm called Citrini Research, which painted a pretty negative scenario about how AI job automation and sort of the white collar economy would affect people's investment portfolios and lead to just really a sort of a spiral of job loss. And those were, I think both, they really struck a nerve in terms of there's clearly this ambient anxiety about how disruptive AI is going to be since the agentic Claude tools came out. I think it's becoming increasingly clear to more and more people that there's 100% chance that there's going to be deep disruption in the white collar economy because of AI. and like, what does that mean for me, and what does that mean for the economy, and what does that mean for jobs? And at the same time, I'd been using these tools, and they just made my life so much better. All of sort of the drudgery in my work was gone. I was waking up just like more joyful about the practice of law. I was feeling like I was doing more of the stuff that I actually went to law school to do than I was before, and that this was really quite good for sort of my firm's bottom line, and made me feel less like a robot than I was before. And I wanted to start writing sort of to like square this circle, to paint a more optimistic picture of how this could play out, to really think about, as we have more and more disruption from AI, sort of where is the value left for humans. And that's, of the 7 articles I put out now, that's really sort of the central through line of the thinking I'm trying to do.
Each week, I take what I'm hearing in conversations with legal leaders, I analyse the market and track emerging trends in this AI era. In my newsletter called The Future Lawyer Market Intel for the AI Era, I'm focused on what AI is exposing, the opportunities, the blind spots, and the shifts shaping the next 5 years. This is how you see the chessboard before everyone else does. It makes perfect sense. It's so logical in terms of let's make our jobs easier and do what we went to law school to do. But people think like that. Lawyers think like that, yes. But there's not many lawyers like you who actually take it that one step further and then decide to actually create or leverage AI to create a law firm that is pretty much run by AI. You mentioned that you built a 2-person firm serving it's probably more than 200 clients now. I don't know, but the rest of it is kind of AI. How do you go from the idea of, oh yeah, this makes sense, to actually doing it in practice and learning how to do it?
Yeah, it's an iterative process. So the 2-person firm existed, but I had more than 2 people at one point. I'm down to 2. Felt like the right number. It's myself. I'm the only partner in the firm, and then I have a really terrific associate who I work with. And so that pre-existed the sort of modern version of the tools that I use. And then my AI use really just sort of ramped up over the last 2 years. So while I think there was some type of 0 to 1 moment in the last couple of months with Claude in particular, the sort of thoughts around how to deliver legal services as a 2-person firm really effectively compete with big law. That's something I had been working on for a while. And I didn't start the firm with the level of automation that we have now in mind. That's something that I sort of just figured out along the way. I'll say in terms of my process of figuring it out, I'm someone, I've written about this. I'm uniquely bad at using tech tools. I am actually not a tech savvy person. I'm very interested in technology. All my clients are in the technology space. I really like thinking about how technology is going to change the future. But personally, my startup clients try and get me to use tools like Asana and Jira and Notion and Slack and all of these horrible things. And I'm really bad at them. I can't. And what I realized is that like modern AI, like especially like reasoning models, don't function like tech tools generally do. There's not a skill to learn. There's not a dashboard. It's just a box. It's a box that you can speak to or type to in plain English. And as it gets more and more sophisticated, it is more and more able to take the just plain English words that you give it and do increasingly magical things. And so in terms of like getting to the sort of level of sophistication of AI that my practice runs on now, I put out an article this week called The Input Layer, where I try and go into more detail about how I do it. But in short, there are really 2 pieces to this. The first is getting good at prompting. Prompting is just a fancy way of saying talking to the AI in English. And getting good at prompting really requires you to do 2 things. The first is to be detailed, and the second is for you to be specific. Detailed is really about what in tech speak you would say giving context to the AI. The AI has been trained on an incredible amount of stuff. Basically everything that's on the internet is in the training data for the AI, but it doesn't know things like what matters when you're drafting a specific contract. This client is sensitive to XYZ. The counterparty is sensitive to XYZ. Here's how much leverage I think we should have. Here are the terms I think are particularly important. And so you need to be very detailed in your instructions to the AI to make sure that it gets all of the stuff that's outside of the AI into the AI so it knows how to help you. One of the things I do, I think that's unusual for lawyers, although you do see stuff like this in the software engineering space, is my prompts can be 2,000 words long. I'm not writing a sentence into the box. I'm I'm writing an essay into the box. Or if I'm using the voice version, I'm sort of free associating or ranting into my phone for several minutes at a time, really to bring the amount of detail you need. Aside from detail, the other part of good prompting is specificity. AI, again, is trained on the entire corpus of the internet. When you leave any room for ambiguity, it just gives you sort of this fuzzy median of its training data, which is what a lot of people refer to as AI slop. And so you need to be incredibly specific, not just saying very specifically what you want, although that's very important, but also specifically saying what you don't want. Because if there's any room for ambiguity, the AI is going to fill that ambiguity with fuzzy, sloppy nonsense. And so the mental model for this that I really like is think about a really literal genie from sort of the stories you might read in childhood about you get 3 wishes and you wish for $1 million, but it falls out of the sky and hits you in the head, or you wish to be the smartest person on earth and then everyone else disappears, right? You have to be very thoughtful about what you want and describe that with specificity in a way that I guess one sub skill there is like having a good sort of imagination to like in order to be able to describe specifically what you want, you do have to be able to picture specifically what you want. But we're not talking about like a technical skill. I hope it's sort of coming across. Like you don't need to learn how any kind of code or dashboard works. It really is a mindset shift of something that looks much more like making wishes to a genie than it does learning how to use some sort of software as a service product. And so that's sort of the first part. I'll pause there. And then the second part is sort of creating skills and agentic workflows out of that.
I'm still shocked at the fact that you said that you're not a technical person. Like how, to me, it's like, how do you create something when you're not technical? And I also don't like those things that you mentioned, Asana, Slack, when it's like, oh, use these software, and it's like, oh, I don't want to have to learn how to get used to some type of other software. It's really annoying for me. But it's interesting what you mentioned about prompting. I actually read your latest article and I thought it was really interesting. I love the way you write, actually. It's great. In that article, you mention about a Microsoft survey where they, I guess, surveyed 31,000 workers and ranked prompt engineer second to last among the roles that companies plan to add, I guess, to their workforce, because they mention it's kind of like basic training. It's not something that somebody should specialize in. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that. I think I kind of agree in terms of it should be part of a skill set as opposed to like one person specializes in just that. What you might disagree. What do you think?
Yeah, I think maybe I do disagree. So the study I brought about Microsoft is really to point out, I guess, the opposite of what I'm saying. There is, when AI was really new in like 2023, there was a lot of excitement about the job of the future was going to be prompt engineering. And the models were not very good at doing reasoning back then. And it turned out if you said stuff to the model, like if you wanted to do legal work, if you just asked the question versus you asked the question with the preface, you are a smart corporate lawyer that's been doing this for, like, it gave you better results. That is mostly obsolete. And there was a cottage industry, and there still is, although it's snake oil, of like, here are the best prompts you can give to Claude to get that. That doesn't work. And just the reasoning models we have today are smarter than that, and so you don't need to do that stuff. And so in that way, prompt engineering is dead. The point I'm trying to make is that like there is a thing that kind of is still prompt engineering, which is different than the like hokey, you are a corporate lawyer, or the 7 prompts that'll change your life. That is immensely valuable, and I actually think is kind of the most important white collar skill of the next decade, which is what I just described, right? It is being able to be detailed and specific about the output you want. I do think that requires specific domain expertise. I'm able to be very good at writing prompts for doing the kind of corporate law that I do. If you ask me to give you detailed and specific prompts for getting differential diagnoses in a hospital, I couldn't do that. Not that I don't know how to talk to the AI. I just don't know how to describe what it is a doctor's thought process is when they're looking for some sort of analysis. And so I think this is the white collar skill. It is like you need the domain expertise, you need good judgment, and then you need to know how to talk to the AI in this way. And whether you call that prompt engineering or something else, I think it is deeply important. And yet companies are not yet adequately selecting for this skill that I think is about to be just incredibly in demand.
Such an interesting take. I really love that. So you're kind of saying that, the role of, for example, a copywriter, you're saying that this could be a potential role in itself, a legal prompt writer, potentially.
I'd go further. I think that's what is going to mean to be a lawyer. I don't think you're going to be able to compete in the practice of law without using agentic AI in a couple of years. I'm just seeing this now, right? Like I do deals across the table from other lawyers, and my turnaround time and accuracy, it's just like an unfair advantage, right? We're not on the same playing field. Eventually people, and clients are going to realize this, and they're going to be willing to pay for what they pay for. And so I just think the market is going to sort this out, that everyone's going to have to use AI. And then, okay, like who is going to be a good and valuable lawyer in the age of AI? It's going to be someone who, most importantly, already was a good lawyer. Now I do think there's going to be this, I wrote another piece called the 10X Lawyer about how I think this plays out in big law. And I think there is going to be a big resorting around sort of what lawyers are sort of best compensated and most valuable. I think, at least, especially in big law firms at the sort of more junior tiers, there is an inadequate current distinction between what lawyers have sort of good, good judgment, good commercial sense, are, good at advising clients and helping them see what the issues are, versus, kind of smart and willing to work hard and bill a lot of hours. I think one of those skills is going to greatly increase in value, and the other of those skills is going to functionally go to zero. And so that is going to lead to like a big resorting in the profession. There's this real arbitrage opportunity right now. If you run a decent sized law firm and you want to recruit for and focus your associate development on helping young attorneys develop judgment, use the latest technology, and really do this sort of super powered version of lawyering, while everyone else is still just focused on the billable hour metric, because that's how people get paid in 2026. That's a pretty incredible advantage you could have right now.
Definitely agree. I actually wrote a post on LinkedIn, just could have been 2 days ago, about this exact thing. And I said, the future junior lawyer, and I say junior because they're the ones whose tasks are kind of being automated more by AI, but I think lawyer in general, but I use junior as like an example. The future junior lawyer will be a legal prompter. And I basically asked AI, so Perplexity, to run through more than 200 legal jobs in London, and to see if any of them mentioned AI skills or prompting or AI literacy or anything around AI. And not a single one mentioned it. And it just shows where we're at now. And it kind of really reinforces your point as well, where the market is kind of behind on what the future looks like. Why do you think that so many law firms or people within the legal industry are not realizing that prompting is the number one skill that needs to be learned?
I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think law has a very sort of traditional cultural blind spot to technology, and kind of always has. When I was clerking in the Southern District of New York in as late as 2016, 2017, we were using Lotus Notes. The same thing when I was on the Second Circuit. We had Word Perfect in 2018 and 2019. Most law firms still use Outlook for email. People use Microsoft Word instead of Google Docs. I think law just has a blind spot. So that's part of it. I put some of the blame on legal tech vendors. I think there is really, really, really well capitalized companies that are sort of selling a bad product. They're selling sort of fear about AI, and they're selling what I call opinionated wrappers that really get in the way of what the AI technology actually does. And instead of focusing on how do you speak to the AI to get amazing results, they're like, here are the 8 things that AI can do for you that we're going to package in a very specific way to justify our $11 billion valuation. They've gotten very good at selling to big law firms, and so I think that is having an impact. And I just don't think there's a lot of fear, partly because of these tech companies, but partly just sort of natural in the law firm ecosystem, about confidentiality and privilege. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about that, and that's getting in the way. And then some of it's just like a creativity thing, right? Like I think, where do I have an edge that allowed me to sort of do this maybe better than other people do? It's because I'm imaginative about some of this stuff, and I really want to sort of push technology and see where it goes. It's not that I have like I'm good in a technical sense. And I think that in some ways, I am a little bit unusual as a lawyer, right? I think the skill set I have is very common in the startup world, very familiar to my clients, which are startups, but I am a different personality type than tends to end up in larger firms. And so I think some of it is just like a cultural thing. But really it will change. I mean, again, I just think this is a market force thing. I think this technology is such an unbelievable value multiplier that there are surely many people, right? Not most, but there are many people in big law firms who are similar enough to me and will figure this out and will have such an advantage in terms of their productivity that I think that's just going to force the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I was having conversations with lawyers just a year ago, and they didn't think that AI was going to really disrupt the legal industry at all. And this was only 1 year ago, and look where we are now. You're creating a law firm where it's AI is doing all the work for you. It's wild how fast things are changing. So it could well be that things change even faster in the next few months, and firms realize that this is something that needs to be developed, I guess.
I mean, it's a shame that like large law firms are not publicly listed in the United States because for the most part, non-lawyers are not allowed to own equity. But like, man, would this be an easy trade if you were a hedge fund to like look at which firms are doing this better than others and have an investment thesis.
So true. So true. Yeah, it's a good point, actually. What are your kind of plans then within your law firm? So you've built this Claude native law firm. Are you planning to build more kind of agents to help? Are you going to bring in more people to then help with prompting those? What's the bigger picture?
Yeah. So some of the bigger picture is in the firm, and some of it's probably outside. So in the firm, we don't really use a lot of like truly agentic things, right? We're not doing open claw. Anything that like could get access to confidential client information, then decide to post about it on Twitter is too scary for me, and so I don't do any of that stuff. But I'm aware that like we've sort of put a mark on ourselves as like being towards the front of AI adoption, and we need to keep the ball moving there. And so I'm constantly, one of the great things very core to our practice is our sort of Claude skills and plugins that we've built. And in my roles, I talk about I use my practice as a reinforcement learning environment to make those better and compound in value over time. And so I'm constantly thinking about new ways to do that and what else can we do with the technology. The technology changes every few months, and so every time that happens, we're going to rethink what is possible and try and push the envelope as far as possible. I'll probably hire a couple more people and we'll sort of expand the firm incrementally. But law firms as service businesses, they don't scale like tech companies. You get a lot of leverage per person, but ultimately like what you're selling is judgment and experience. And it really needs to be the right people to join the firm. And if anyone's listened to this, like the right people probably looks like 1 to 3 years of training in like an elite big law environment, serving startup clients. So like if you're someone who's at Cooley or Fenwick or Gunderson or Wilson Sonsini or Goodwin, like please do reach out. Like we will probably hire a couple more people. But the downside of my practice, I mean, the thing I love about my practice is it's a very high touch, high judgment environment. I'm spending a lot of time specifically with like startup founders and advising them on the stuff that like really matters to them as they build cool technology. That's great in terms of like being a lawyer. That's actually pretty bad in terms of like how much can AI realistically scale the practice, where I think you're going to get like incredible leverage from the sort of type of AI usage I figured out how to do is going to be sort of really high end transactions. So big M&A, big private equity deals, high end litigation. These are things where like the difference between a $1 million deal, acquisition and a $1 billion deal isn't that much different. It might be a little bit different, but what really scales is the busy work, and that's what can be automated. And so the people sort of with those big clients doing those deals are going to be the people who accrue the most benefit from the type of automation that I'm doing. So right now I'm looking at, where there's this moment where, I'm happy to name, right? Like Harvey and Lagora, I think are taking law firms down the wrong path. I think the opinion wrappers are not just like unhelpful and a huge waste of money. I think they're like deeply counterproductive because they're getting between lawyers and the AI. Lawyers should be using sort of the bare metal of the AI. It's smart enough that all you have to do is talk to it. And so you don't need their product, and you shouldn't be using products like that. And on the other hand, like I think I found this like really optimistic, empowering way for lawyers to use AI. And if I can play any role in sort of steering the giant ship of like law towards the more optimistic outcome away from the less optimistic outcome, which like, by the way, I'm sorry to like I keep dumping on these companies, but like if you look at the valuations, the only way to justify a venture return from here is like they are going to replace lawyers en masse. And like, if you're a lawyer who's using Harvey and Lagora, like, they're not saying this because they want lawyers to use it, but like, they're watching every keystroke you do and they are going to automate your job away. That's the only way to make the math work for them. I don't think that's a good outcome for individual lawyers. I do think learning how to use AI to amplify your judgment is a great outcome for lawyers. And so I'm looking for asymmetric ways to be able to help us move towards the better outcome. And ultimately that probably looks like some sort of service offering where I work with bigger law firms than mine that do sort of the higher leverage work, or maybe some sort of tech product that looks very different than what's on the market now. I'm still sort of in the exploratory stages of that, but I don't know that necessarily sort of flows out of a two-person law firm. And so I'm going to do both. I do love my practice. I love working with my clients, and it's an incredibly important sort of training ground for the cutting edge of the tech stuff that I want to do. But I do want to also find ways to have a bigger impact outside of just the practice that I own.
Wow, I love those plans. I love how ambitious you are as well. And I think also how creative you are. I think if I was you, I would probably feel some kind of responsibility to help others because you built something really incredible, honestly. And I think, like you say, other law firms or, well, yeah, other law firms and lawyers want to probably they're probably so intrigued and want to know, how do I do this for myself, how do I build these skills and be creative like you have done without having to be so techy like you say. So I think it's amazing. I also think it's such a super interesting point what you say about the big tech companies, Harvey, Lagora, and the rest of them. And I didn't think like this, but you are right in the sense that they are not allowing lawyers to actually think for themselves, as in, how do I prompt, how do I experiment? But then at the same time, I've spoken to heads of legal teams, and they are trying to encourage that experimentation with other tools like Gemini, Claude, these things, as well as using Harvey and Lagora. So I think, do you think having that two-pronged approach, using tools like Harvey, Lagora, the other ones, and allowing curiosity and experimentation with other tools is the right way to go? Or do you think just ditch the legal tech completely?
It's been a while since I practiced in a big firm, and this is something I'd like to explore with big firms. My current sense is that I don't see it value at all for the current sort of opinionated legal AI wrappers. I think it is counterproductive.
That's so funny. I just love how you just like, yeah, I don't care. That's just what I feel. I want to go back to the prompting thing. So, what would you suggest then? How, in fact, no, how do you suggest lawyers learn prompting? What is the best way?
Yeah, I actually think that like, lawyers already know how to prompt. So the skills are being detailed and specific. I just think that's a thing that good lawyers do already. Like, if you're making a legal argument, before a court, or you're writing a litigation brief, you have to be detailed and specific about the argument you're making. If you're writing a contract, right, a commercial contract, like, fundamentally, what is it to write a commercial contract? You are trying to understand your clients, the principal's business goals, and you are trying to capture all of those, right? Make sure you're not leaving anything out. That's the detailed part. And you're trying to encode that into legal language in a way that can't be misinterpreted or create unintended ambiguity that leads to litigation down the road. That's specificity. What I would say first, like, you already know how to do that. In terms of like speaking to the AI, you also know how to do that. It's the way that a senior lawyer talks to a junior lawyer, right? And every, big law firm in the world, there's a scene that plays out many times every day, which is a more junior lawyer comes into the more senior lawyer's office and sits at one of those little chairs on the other side of the desk. And the senior lawyer gives sort of like the brain dump of like, here's the assignment I'd like you to do, and here's all the stuff that you need to know. And that's just the prompt. Just everything you said to that junior lawyer, if you just recorded that, and you can just have the Claude app on your phone and you hit the little microphone button and you say the same thing you would say to the associate, that's probably a pretty good starting place for a prompt. There are some ways in which the AI is going to be better than the lawyer you're talking to. And there are some ways it's going to be worse. And in the ways that it's worse, you can correct for, right? That's just another thing you say to the AI. And then, we haven't really talked about how sort of like skills work, but you can really train it to get better over time by using skills and plugins and similar sort of agentic processes.
I think people listening will probably feel relieved by the fact that you just said lawyers already know how to prompt, and you're right that they're constantly having to explain processes and formulate them.
I stand by all of what I just said. And in addition to that, this is part of the reason I also hate the legal AI tools. I really think that the best way to do this is not to tell lawyers, here is like how you need to use AI. I believe in like teaching people what the technology is and like the mindset of how to use it. But I think it's really important not to be overly prescriptive about specifically how to use it. The best lawyers out there have a way of doing things that works for them. They have a process that their clients trust, and that's why they're doing well. AI is good enough now to just watch you do that and build custom tools around you that work like superpowers. And we should not be interrupting that sort of individual process that the lawyer has and telling them, no, you actually need to learn to do something different. And I think that should be relieving too, is that like the most powerful way to use AI is just the stuff you're doing now, but do it as an input into the AI, right? Everything, all of the hard cognitive work, all of the thinking, all of the deliberating, just like do that and dump it in the box and then see what comes out. And it's like, that's it, right? You don't need to do someone else's idea of what legal work should look like. Now, I do think that like one potentially like uncomfortable corollary of that is that this is going to be both just amazing for the lifestyle and professional success, lifestyle in terms of like your grunt work will be gone and your work will be more fun, of people who are genuinely good at lawyering. That doesn't describe all lawyers. There are a lot of people who have jobs as lawyers where their value add is not that they are thoughtful or commercially reasonable or good at client service. They're just good soldiers. They're just hard workers and they bill hours. And that skill is like going to go to zero. And this is not going to be good for everyone. But I think there's sort of like a virtuous element where this is going to be good for the people who are like here for the right reasons.
What about paralegals and admin people? What do you think they should do?
I think the message for more or less all white collar workers in the world right now is like start playing with this technology and seeing what you can do with it. I don't know the right answer for all of those different roles. I think if you're someone who's deciding to go to law school now, yeah, it's a tough time. And like you have to really think about like what is it you want to do? If you have a clear idea of what you'd like to do with the law, now might be the best time ever to go to law school. If you're going to law school because it seems like, oh, this is like a pretty sort of conservative way to an upper middle class salary, like that's probably not going to continue to be true as like the big law leverage model breaks. And so really you just kind of got to try this for yourself. Now I'll say like in terms of like AI automation, everything I've been describing so far and sort of my process is really about literally automating the practice of law. It's about using AI to express being a lawyer. There is a separate sort of but and very important thread of like how to use AI to disrupt and transform the sort of process of how a law firm works. Other than like the lawyering itself, there's the case management, file management, which like is important now and will become even more important with AI. For example, like when you talk to the AI, you want it to have all of the context about your client. You want to store all of the information possible. Maybe you record more calls than you did before, every email, whatever, stored in a secure, easily machine readable, and like easily auditable so you don't have hallucinations way. I think that is going to be probably more the job of like tech companies to build out that layer. But it could be that like what paralegals do today becomes a sort of much more sort of interesting and powerful job of like managing that context layer and the information systems for the law firms that like feed the AI that the lawyers are talking to. Just like I don't think that like yes, 100% guaranteed if AI doesn't get any better, which like of course it will, AI is going to deeply disrupt the practice of law and break a lot of the business models that are out there. But that's not an extinction level event for lawyers. It's of course also going to transform how law firms work. I don't think that's necessarily an extinction level event for paraprofessionals, but the job is going to look different. And my advice for someone in that position is the same I'd say to a lawyer, which is like get your hands on like the good tools and figure out what you can use them for based on what you do now. Just try and do your hardest work with the AI.
I think it's a really good message to white collar workers, as you say, to do what you can with AI and be creative and experiment. I watched a podcast recently with, I don't know if you know, a guy called Daniel Priestley. He talks a lot about AI and, oh, you need to, but he said something super interesting about lawyers and AI. He said that, so he gave an example. So he has a huge company. It's like a event company, and he had a case that he needed to be resolved by a lawyer, by a law firm, and the law firm said, okay, the starting like fee will be £50,000, so around 60,000 US dollars. And he was like, right, okay. Him and his team went to Claude, and Claude provided advice, documentation. Obviously, I wouldn't rely on AI for advice, especially if you're not a lawyer. But basically, it gave him everything he needed, and he saved $60,000, right? And he said, but that's not the point. The point is that he said that he thinks the future of lawyers is to be the prompter, like you say, but giving prompting guidance to clients as opposed to prompting themselves to give the advice to the clients. Do you know what I mean? Like basically being like, okay, if you provide Claude with this prompt, you'll get the right answer for what you need. What do you think about that?
I'm very skeptical of that. I don't think that's true for a number of reasons. One is just like a very mechanical reason, which is about privilege. We are starting to get case law in the United States about what use of AI is privileged versus what is not. We had a famous ruling, a month or two ago in the Southern District of New York by Judge Rakoff in the Hepner case about a white collar criminal defendant who was using AI, Claude specifically, to go back and forth about like his theories under securities law, sent it to his lawyer, and that was found not to be privileged, and the government got access to it, and it was used against him at trial. So use of AI inside a law firm, I think, is very likely to be covered by attorney work product privilege in a way that client use is not. And so that's just one thing that I think makes what you're describing difficult. And then, like at a higher level, at least my experience so far is I have very tech forward clients. Many of them try and use AI to do like a first pass at like legal work and then send me the output. And I've found like not only does that not save me any time, it actually like takes extra time to like unfurl what they're trying to do. Whereas if they just said to me in plain English what they're looking for, like I have AI, I also can write like just tell me what you're looking for and I will translate that into legalese. If I use the AI output they give me, that actually poisons my AI and makes it harder for it to think from first principles. And so they get worse work output. To the extent that like lawyers add value, the value is going to be knowing what to prompt, and it's going to be very specific to each legal question, right? Like my prompts are never the same. There's no like universally good prompt that you can give the AI that's going to lead the same result every time, because every situation is unique in its own way. And I do think like the cost of certain legal services will come down. And I have mixed feelings about like pro se use of AI. Right now, it's clearly a problem in the courts where people are thinking they can be their own lawyer. It's probably actually true for some people, right? If you have good intuitions that happen to be similar to how a lawyer thinks, like you can probably teach yourself to do that. In most cases, it's very dangerous because it will, make it seem like you know what you're doing when you don't. And there's that, hilarious, I guess, the recent case where this lady got convinced by ChatGPT that her lawyer was wrong. She fired him, made all sorts of crazy arguments, and caused millions of dollars in damages. I think that's going to happen more than people who are effective pro se with AI, but that's possible. But I think the idea that like lawyers are not going to directly prompt the AI, they're going to give example prompts to clients. Like I very much doubt that.
I mean, the way that you explain it makes perfect sense. And it's just, I guess people are coming up with these throwaway comments like, oh, and not actually thinking through, well, actually, what value do lawyers actually bring? And what about regulation and compliance and data protection? And but also the actual technicalities of it. Like you say, you don't have generic prompts. It's specific to the individual task that you're doing and the individual client and scenario. So yeah, that's interesting actually.
Yeah, and I guess one last thing, because I've now referenced a few times that we have talked about. I don't have generic prompts. I do have generic skills. So a prompt is like how do you get information in the AI. The skill is not about context. It is about process. It is step A, then step B, then step C. And so just a practical skill for lawyers who might be listening to this. The way I created my skills, which is how I would recommend everyone do it, is like first get good at prompting. Do that for a month or two, and don't worry about skills or agentic stuff at all. Just get good at prompting. At some point, after I'd done heavy Claude usage for a month or two, Anthropic came out with this 33-page PDF you can very easily find online with Google about how to create custom skills. And I thought to myself, well, 33 pages is a really long technical document. I'm not going to read that. That seems really long. And so I gave it to Claude and I said, please look at all of my chats with you back to the beginning of time, read this document, and then pitch me on the 5 skills you think you can build for me that will make my life better and my work easier. And it did a great job. Not the generic skills. It's like it was specific to the way it watched me using the AI And so it pitched me on stuff that was good. And so I said, great, build them. And so I had very useful out of the box skills. And then I continued to use my work as like this reinforcement learning environment where every time the skill did something unexpectedly good, I like stopped Claude and I said, wait, let's look at why this went well and update the skill to make sure this happens more often. And conversely, when things go poorly, all right, why didn't this work? Let's update the skill so this doesn't happen again. And so then the usefulness of these skills compounds over time. And so that's where you get like really this sort of like incredible efficiency and economy of scale. But it's not about the prompt, right? It's not about like, you can give someone a prompt that's going to work across like that is not going to work. What does scale across situations is the process, right? Whether that's the process of how do I think about writing a reply brief, right? Well, I do research and then I do this and then the section headings and the formatting should be this and what like that is what's reusable. And unlike prompts, which I think like prompting is really about like being able to describe a specific situation in sufficient detail and specificity. Skills, I think, are going to become genuinely valuable IP that people could share or sell or whatever. And that's where a lot of sort of the interesting tech stuff lives.
It is so fascinating talking to you because you're just so forward thinking and so informed because you are creative with it. Oh, that honestly, that's just like blown my mind.
It's really worth trying out. And literally what I described, that step-by-step process of like find that same 33-page PDF I used, like make sure you've used Claude enough that it has like training data, but then just ask it what skills it should build for you. It's going to blow your mind.
Whoa, I'm totally going to try that. Where is the biggest underestimated opportunity for lawyers in AI right now, apart from the obvious things about being more efficient with like, using leveraging AI for their admin tasks and stuff?
It's not just admin tasks. Like I guess there are a couple ways of answering that. One is, and this is pretty like all the advice I'm about to give, I think generalizes to white collar work and is not specific to lawyers, but is definitely true of lawyers. Number one, use AI for your hardest tasks, not your easiest tasks. It's easy to see how AI can like automate away the like routine admin stuff. And yeah, that's great. You should do that. But no, actually like try it with the hard stuff. Watch where it like surprises you and it can do work that you didn't think it could. Watch where it breaks and where the frontier is and like what doesn't go well and see if you can like talk to the AI to get it better at that stuff. So that's one I think just like underappreciated. Like you should be using AI for the hard stuff, the heavy cognitive lift. Another thing is, and I think this absolutely broadens to the white collar economy in general, like there's going to be a lot of automation. I think there are going to be fewer jobs inside firms in the future, but now is genuinely the best time in history to do something entrepreneurial. And lawyers are really scared of entrepreneurial stuff. It's culturally looked down upon in certain circles to like hang a shingle, but like what you're going to be able to get done as a 1 or 2 person team or a 5 person team is going to be unbelievable. And if the big firms don't figure this out, which is absolutely possible, for all sorts of reasons, right? Like if the managing partners at firms are making $25 million a year because of a leverage model that's going to break, and so they have that like giant blind spot because they're like, listen, maybe this is going to break, but if I keep this up for 3 more years, I'm rich enough. I don't need to worry about it. Like, what an opportunity to go and steal clients from people who are not going to figure out the fix in time. So entrepreneurial efforts, I think, like absolutely deeply underappreciated opportunity, and just like break some taboos. Lawyers are really rigid about a lot of stuff. You're going to be able to get just all of this automated help. Just like go out and try things. Try and take more of like a entrepreneurial mindset, I think, sort of to your whole career. And I think those people are going to be rewarded, whereas like being really set in your ways is not. And I guess the last thing I'd say, a lot of what I'm describing is, although it's not complicated, I'm saying very simple things, right? Be detailed, be specific, tell the AI to build skills for you. None of that is like complicated at all. Figuring out how to do it is sort of like a heavy cognitive lift. And I think one area where sort of AI is dangerous and leads to these sort of like K-shaped outcomes is, on the one hand, for people who are willing to do the difficult cognitive work, it's going to be an absolute superpower and you're going to have a blast and you're going to be way more productive. But AI also provides a really big temptation to turn your brain off, right? And to say, this is too hard. I'm just going to say to Claude or ChatGPT, just do it. And then I'm going to like pass off that. And those people might get away with it for like a little bit, but like you really then are not adding any value beyond the AI. And like you're going to make real mistakes because they're going to be hallucinations. And those people just absolutely are, their labor is going to go to zero. And so a lot of the caricatures of AI and a lot of what you hear in law about AI is like, oh, this like person submitted a brief and it cited all these fake cases. And like, that's not a failure of AI. That is a failure of the lawyer, right? Like, it's just very clearly, like, how would you ever submit a brief to a judge and not check that the cases you're citing are all real? Like, that's just not. And by the way, like, it's easy to build automated tools that do that for you. Like, it's really not hard. All of this is like, do not take AI as an invitation to turn your brain off. Like, that is the really dangerous temptation a lot of people are going to face. And so the mental model here is like, and I think this is underappreciated because lawyers are scared of AI and they just want to paint the picture of the lazy version. Do all of the hard stuff you're going to do before. Do it in some way that can be ingested by the AI, and really that boils down to you're typing it into a computer. You can even just do it in Microsoft Word. Just, this is actually another really joyful thing about it. Like, I can just mash my fingers in the keyboard and free associate about like what I want out of the AI, and the grammar and the spelling can be awful, and I repeat things multiple times and it's not organized at all. But then that doesn't matter, right? Like, it's 2,000 words of like mush, but it has all of the context that I need, and I just copy and paste that into Claude, and then it comes out as this beautiful contract, right? That's an incredible experience. Like, do that. Don't skip the hard cognitive work.
I do agree, because it can make you very, very lazy, using AI. I don't know how you kind of not go down that road, because it's so easy, and I guess you have to be super conscious of, I need to check this like I would check anything else, I need to just be conscious of the fact that I have to think, even though the AI is making things so much easier for me, as you would if a human was doing the tasks for you, and you have to check them through. So yeah, it's a really, really
And
good
it
point,
doesn't need to be
actually.
totally manual, right? Like, again, here there's lots of room for creativity making this easier. So I think there are two types of it. There's the like doing the thought that goes into the AI in the first place. If you're here for the right reasons, if you're like a good lawyer, you actually should enjoy that. Like, you should enjoy strategizing and thinking through what you're trying to do for your client. And like, if you don't enjoy that, probably this is not going to be a great decade for you, but also you shouldn't have been a lawyer. Like, I'm sorry. And then there's the stuff that, like, checking citations. Yes, no one likes that. You should do that, but you don't need to do that. Like, there are all sorts of, you can build a skill. And by build a skill, I mean, tell Claude to build the skill that checks every citation and gives you a memo with a link to the actual stuff. And that makes it much harder for the AI to hallucinate. You can use different AI models to check each other, right? You take your Claude output and you put it in Chat GPT and you say, make sure none of these citations are wrong. That'll get you like a lot of the way there. You can have things show up in redline, in comments, like whatever you need to flag things to make the site check easier, right? Including like, I need links to all this stuff. You can do all that, and you don't have to do it manually in the way you did before. You just need to have some process that doesn't lead to you giving a federal judge fake cases. It just seems like such a low bar. Like, I don't know why anyone would have to say this, but yeah, there are many, many cases of this happening.
Like you say, it's just a mindset shift. That's the key.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. You just gotta get good at talking to the AI, and that's literally it. That's the whole key to the future.